Yeah, bad for the glass.
Oh, yes. Bad for glass. Salt water, very bad for glass.
Hello to all the classic people that are returning. I'm glad you're back. I want to welcome any new visitors. As a technical note, references and citations are listed for each show on the site at classicmovierev.com. Today on Classic Movie Rev, we are taking on neo-noir Chinatown, 1974. Writing this movie up was like giving birth. Thought it was going to take forever. Before we get going, I want to shout out to Robert H. for recommending this and some other movies. Thanks for the email, Robert. Send me an email if you want to talk about movies. Don't forget to follow the links in the show notes or from the site to visit our store. We have some interesting designs for tees, stickers, masks, mugs, and pins. Chinatown 1974 is probably the greatest film of the neo-noir era. I have this film ranked number 1 on my list of essential neo-noir films. This movie won the Oscar for Best Writing, for Best Original Screenplay, Robert Towne. It was nominated for 10 more, including Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director, and Best Cinematography. This movie has a pretty good 8.1 on imdb.com, and it does just as well on Rotten Tomatoes with 99% on the tomato meter and 93% audience approval. The great film critic Roger Ebert listed Chinatown 1974 on his list of great movies. He also said in a 4-star review dated February 6, 2000, quote, "Like most noir stories, Chinatown ends in a flurry of revelation. All is explained, relationships are redefined, and justice is done. Or not." Towne writes of his eventual conflict with Roman, the director, and enduring disappointment over the literal and ghostly bleak climax of the movie. Certainly the wrong people are alive and dead at the end of the film, but I'm not sure Polanski was wrong. He made the movie just 5 years after his wife Sharon Tate was one of the victims of the Manson gang and can be excused from tilting towards despair. If the film had been made 10 years later, the studio might have insisted on an upbeat ending, but it was produced during a brief window when Robert Evans oversaw a series of Paramount's best films, including The Godfather. Unquote. New York Times film critic Vincent Canby said on June 21, 1974, quote, "When Robert Altman set out to make Chandler's The Long Goodbye, he had the good sense to turn it into a contemporary film that was as much a comment on the form as an evocation of it. Mr. Polanski and Mr. Towne have attempted nothing so witty and entertaining, being content instead to make a completely stylish, more or less 30-ish movie that continually makes me wish I was back seeing The Maltese Falcon or The Big Sleep. Others may not be as finicky. Among the good things in Chinatown are the performances by Mr. Nicholson, who wears an air of comic, lazy, very vulnerable sophistication that is this film's major contribution to the genre. Fay Ray is the widow of the film's first murder victim, a woman too beautiful to be either good or true, and John Huston, who plays a wealthy old tycoon whose down-home, sod-kicking manner can't quite disguise the sort of fantasticism displayed by Sidney Greenstreet in Mr. Huston's Maltese Falcon." Unquote. So, let's get going with the actors.
Right, and I'm a Shakespearean actor.
John Huston played the pervy Noah Cross. This great film director was first covered in Battle for the Planet of the Apes, 1973. Prolific and incredible actor James Hong played the butler to the Mulrays. This great actor was first covered in Go Tell the Spartans, 1978. Bruce Glover played Duffy, one of Jake's associates. Glover, the father of Crispin Glover, was first covered in Hard Times, 1975. Jack Nicholson plays hard-boiled private investigator J.J. Gittes. Nicholson was born in New Jersey in 1937. He graduated from Manasquan High School in Manasquan, New Jersey. After graduation, Nicholson moved to Los Angeles where his mother was living. He planned on being a screenwriter. He ended up working in the mailroom at the Hanna-Barbera cartoon division. His first movie was The Crybaby Killer, 1958. Nicholson was in The Little Shop of Horrors, 1960. He also tried directing and writing. One of his co-writing projects was for the movie Head, 1968, for the Monkees television band. The movie was supposed to be like A Hard Day's Night 1964, but it was a tripped-out madhouse that did more harm to the band than good, as no one understood the film. Nicholson showed his acting talents with films such as Easy Rider 1969, Five Easy Pieces 1970, The Last Detail 1973, Chinatown 1974, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest 1975. For this last role, he won a Best Actor Oscar. He broke into the 80s with Kubrick's The Shining 1980. Although nowhere near as good as the book, Nicholson was pretty scary. He continued with fairly good movies in the 80s, but they were 80s films with the big hair and parachute pants. These included Terms of Endearment 1983, for which he won a Best Actor Oscar. Other films include Reds 1981, Prizzi's Honor 1985, Broadcast News 1987, The Witches of Eastwick 1987, and Batman 1989. He starred in some excellent roles in the 90s, such as playing a psycho in A Few Good Men 1992, biopic Hoffa 1992, dual roles in the sci-fi comedy Mars Attacks 1996, and As Good as It Gets 1997. Nicholson won another Best Actor Oscar for this last role. Nicholson worked into the 2000s with films like About Schmidt 2002, Something's Gotta Give 2003, The Departed 2006, where he did a great job as a bad guy, and The Bucket List 2007. His last credit was in 2010. Faye Dunaway was in the role of Evelyn Mulray. She was born in 1941 in Florida. Dunaway graduated from Leon High School in Tallahassee, Florida in 1959. She started at Florida State University and then transferred to that alligator school before earning a degree from Boston University in 1962. Dunaway chose a stage role over attending the London Academy of Music and Drama Arts on a Fulbright scholarship. After 2 years on the stage, having done some television work, Dunaway was cast in The Happening 1967. 1967 was the year that she became a major star with her portrayal of gangster Bonnie Parker in Bonnie and Clyde 1967. The following year she was in the heist movie The Thomas Crown Affair 1968 with Steve McQueen. Dunaway was excellent as seductress Miss Pendrake in Little Big Man 1970. She carried this type of role onward as Lady de Winter in The Three Musketeers 1973 and The Four Musketeers Milady's Revenge 1974. She was great in Chinatown 1974. Dunaway was again super in the spy thriller 3 Days of the Condor 1975. She did well in The Disappearance of Amy 1976 before another excellent performance in Network 1976. For this role she won a Best Actress Oscar on her third nomination. Dunaway did a couple of stinkers such as The Eyes of Laura Mars 1978, The Champ 1979, and The First Deadly Sin 1980. What apparently knocked her career back was Mommy Dearest 1981. She played Joan Crawford over the top, and the No More Coat Hangers line and the pancake makeup were harshly parodied. Dunaway left the U.S. for England. She would pop up in a film now and again such as The Wicked Lady 1983 or Supergirl 1984. Upon her return to the U.S. in 1987, she was in Barfly, The Handmaid's Tale 1990. She did voice work for Chinatown's inferior sequel, The Two Jakes 1990, and later she starred in Gia 1998. She became embroiled in a lawsuit with Andrew Lloyd Webber after he closed the stage production of Sunset Boulevard, claiming that Dunaway could not handle the singing. In 2017, while on stage to present the Best Picture Oscar, her co-presenter Warren Beatty was given the wrong envelope and they announced the wrong movie as the winner. It was totally not her fault, but she shared the blame anyway. She continues to act, now into her 70s, and plans on more stage work. Story.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
The year is 1937 in the city of Los Angeles. Private investigator Jake J.J. Gittes, Jack Nicholson, shows client Curly, Burt Young, pictures of Curly's wife having an affair. Curly doesn't take it well. After Curly leaves, Jake's secretary, Sophie, Nandu Hines, says that Mrs. Mulray, Diane Ladd, Walsh, Joe Mantell, and Duffy, Bruce Glover, are waiting to see him. Miss Mulray explains that her husband is having an affair. Walsh and Duffy are Jake's associates. Jake tries to talk Mrs. Mulray out of going forward with the investigation. Her husband Hollis, Darrell Swilling, is the chief engineer of the city water and power. Jake goes to a city water planning meeting. The issue is that Los Angeles is located between the ocean and a desert. There is not enough fresh water for the growing community. Mayor Bagby, Roy Roberts, is lobbying for an $8 million dam project called Alto Vallejo.
Gentlemen, today you can walk out that door, turn right, hop a streetcar, and within 25 minutes end up smack in the Pacific Ocean. Now you can swim in it and you can fish in it, but you can't drink it, and you can't irrigate an orange grove with it. Now remember, we live next door to the ocean, but we also live on the edge of a desert. Los Angeles is a desert community. Beneath this building, beneath our streets, is a desert. And without water, the dust will rise up and cover us as though we never existed.
Hollis Mulray explains that the soil beneath Alto Vallejo is too unstable for the dam project. An angry farmer, played by Rance Howard, father of director Ron Howard, runs a herd of sheep into the meeting to complain about the water being taken away from the valley to support the city. Later, Jake watches Hollis drive out to the dry riverbed and look at the ground. He consults some maps. Jake follows Hollis to an outlet that drains into the ocean. Hollis again checks the ground. Shortly after sunset, the pipe opens and sprays water. Hollis is still below. Jake returns to his car where he finds a Save Our City flyer urging him to vote yes on the ballot initiative. Jake opens his glove box and there are dozens of old pocket watches. He sets one of the watches and places it under the tire of Hollis's car. Back in the office, Jake examines the now smashed pocket watch and finds out that Hollis stayed at the drain all night. Walsh brings in some photos of Hollis arguing with Noah Cross, John Huston. Walsh says he only heard the words Apple Core. Duffy calls in and says he has located Hollis at Echo Park. Hollis is rowing a blonde woman in one of the boats. Jake photographs the pair. Jake follows them and gets a picture of them embracing in an apartment. The next day, the picture that Jake took at the apartment is on the front page of the newspaper. He is getting a shave and is accosted by another customer about the ethics of his work. Jake returns to his office and is excited to tell a joke he heard. Jake won't listen to his associates until the door opens and the real Mrs. Evelyn Mulray, Faye Dunaway, and her lawyer open the door. Jake finishes the dirty joke, not knowing he has visitors. Evelyn says she's going to sue Jake. Her lawyer serves Jake with some papers. Jake goes to see Mr. Mulray and blows by the secretary. She calls for help as Jake goes through Hollis's desk. Jake looks at some plans on the table. Yelburton, John Hillerman, comes to take Jake out of the office. Jake takes a stack of Yelburton's cards as he leaves. At the elevator, Jake finds out that the Water and Power Department has hired a tough guy, Mulvihill, Roy Jensen. Yelburton confirms that water is being taken from the farmers for the city. Jake goes to Hollis's mansion, and the door is answered by Evelyn's butler, James Hong. Jake watches a Japanese gardener fish some weeds out of an artificial pond. The man comments, "Bad for glass."
Bad for glass.
Yeah, sure. Bad for the glass.
Jake sees something shiny in the pond, but he stops when Evelyn comes out. Jake apologizes and Evelyn says she will drop the lawsuit. Jake wants to talk to Hollis first so he can smoke out who set him up. Evelyn says Hollis usually walks at one of the reservoirs in the afternoon. Jake drives to a reservoir, but the police are guarding it. He uses one of Yelburton's cards to gain access. When Jake drives in, he is met by other police and two detectives, Escobar, Perry Lopez, and Loach, Richard Balkagian.
You butchered that.
Escobar says he doesn't work in Chinatown anymore. Jake says that he is looking for Hollis and is shown the dead man being dragged out of the reservoir. He is apparently drowned. Evelyn identifies the body and Escobar asks if he may have been a suicide. They ask about her hiring Jake. She plays along. Neither knows the name or the location of Hollis's girlfriend. Jake takes Evelyn out to her car. She says she will send him a check so he will be officially hired. Jake meets with the mortician, Charles Knapp. They have the body of a man that's been living in one of the storm drains. The mortician says the man was drowned just like Hollis. Jake goes to the second drowning site and sees the young boy on a horse that was in the dry riverbed when Hollis visited earlier. The boy says that he told Hollis that the water comes every night in a different part of the river. That night, Jake returns to the reservoir and climbs the fence. As soon as he is over the fence, someone starts shooting at him. He jumps into a water course. Almost immediately, the race begins flowing with water, and Jake is almost drowned. Jake climbs over the fence, but is soon grabbed by Mulvihill and a man with a knife played by the director. Mulvihill punches Jake first, and the other man says Jake is a nosy fella before slitting his nose open with a switchblade. The man says next time he will take the whole nose. Jake looks like Tycho Brahe with his nose patched. Against his associate's advice, Jake wants to find out who is behind all of the shenanigans. Jake gets a call from Ida Sessions. She says she is the one who pretended to be Mrs. Mulray. She won't tell who hired her, but she tells Jake to look in the obituary column and he will find one of those people. Jake reads the paper at a nice restaurant. The headlines say the city council has passed a water bond issue. Evelyn comes in to join him. He thinks she has more to tell him about what happened. Evelyn admits that she's been having affairs too.
Actually, I knew about the affair.
How did you find out?
My husband.
He told you? And you weren't the least bit upset.
I was grateful.
Mrs. Mulray, you'll have to explain that.
Why?
Look, I do matrimonial work. It's my métier. When a wife tells me that she's happy that her husband is cheating on her, it runs contrary to my experience.
Unless what?
She was cheating on him.
Jake finds that her maiden name was Cross. He tells her that somehow her husband Hollis found out that the city has been draining millions of gallons of fresh water from the reservoir every night, even though they are in the middle of a drought. Jake says her husband was killed because he found out this information. He also says the man in the storm drain was killed in a water release. Jake goes back to Yelburton's office. In the outer office, he sees a picture from 1929 showing Noah Cross. Jake recognizes Noah as the man arguing in the street with Hollis in the pictures. He also connects the name with Evelyn. Yelburton makes Jake wait in the outer office with his secretary. There are other pictures of Noah and Hollis. The secretary says that Hollis Mulray and Noah Cross own the water department. Hollis forced Noah to sell it to the city. Jake tells Yelburton that he thinks that Hollis was murdered. Jake accuses Yelburton of hiring Ira Sessions to help get Hollis out of the way so the dam could be built. He tells about the water dumping and Hollis's murder. Jake threatens to release the story to the press. Yelburton says there is runoff because they are providing free water to help orange growers north of town. Jake says he doesn't want to get Yelburton in trouble, but he wants to find the big guys behind the scam. When Jake gets back to his office, Evelyn is waiting for him. She offers him a lot of money if he finds out who killed her husband and why. Evelyn married Hollis after he and her father, Noah, split up the business. She says Hollis and Noah were at odds because of the first dam that failed. Jake meets a man at the Oceanfront Albacore Club and is driven to meet Noah Cross for lunch at Cross's mansion. Jake drops that Hollis was murdered. Escobar still thinks Hollis's death was an accident. Cross asks Jake if he is sleeping with Evelyn. He offers double what Evelyn is paying if Jake can locate Hollis's girlfriend. Jake tells Cross that he knows about the argument. Cross says it was about Evelyn.
She happens to think the last one was murdered.
How'd she get that idea?
I think I gave it to her.
I hope you don't mind. I believe they should be served with the head.
Fine, as long as you don't serve the chicken that way.
He says he didn't want his daughter to find out about Hollis's affair. Jake says he is heading to check out some orange groves. Jake goes to the Hall of Records where he finds out that most of the land in Los Angeles County with orange groves has recently been sold. Jake steals the page containing the names of the buyers. Jake drives north to Orange Country and finds that most of the land is for sale or has already been sold. The land is without water and very dry. He drives past a no trespassing sign and is shot at by a man on horseback. Jake desperately drives away, but is shot at by more men with guns until he crashes his car into a tree. The men pull Jake out of the car and give him a good beating. The leader of the men wants to know if he's from the water department or real estate people. The leader says the water department has been harassing them and polluting water wells. Under questioning, Jake mentions the name Mulray, and another fight starts.
Mrs. Evelyn Mulray.
Mulray. That's the son who's done it to us.
Mulray's dead. You don't know what you're talking about, you dumb okie.
Jake is beaten unconscious. When Jake comes to, Evelyn is there, having been called by the farmers. On the drive back, Jake explains to Evelyn that the dam project is a con job. The folks behind it are trying to get Los Angeles to build it, but the water will irrigate the newly purchased orange groves. They have starved the farmers of water and have been buying the lands at bargain price. When the land gets a steady supply of water, the value will skyrocket. Jake realizes that people that are dead are still buying plots of land. Jake and Evelyn go to the retirement home where one of the land buyers / dead person was living. He and Evelyn pretend to be a married couple trying to find a place for Jake's father-in-law. During the tour, they find the other land buyers' names among the residents of the home. Jake talks to a woman and tells her that she owns some valuable land. She says she does not. Then he notices that she is sewing the emblem of the Albacore Club into the quilt. Noah Cross, Evelyn's father, owns the club. The host arrives and says the retirement home is an unofficial charity of the Albacore Club. Then he ushers the couple out of the hall and takes them to Mulvihill. Jake asked Evelyn to go to the car, and suddenly Jake jumps Mulvihill and beats the crap out of him. It looks like Jake is going to get away when he sees the man that cut his nose and another coming towards him. Evelyn speeds past the thugs in her car, and Jake jumps inside. The thugs fire as the car flees. Evelyn is cool as a cucumber as she drives. They go back to her mansion. As they drink, Evelyn asks Jake about his work. Jake says he hasn't had a day like this since he worked for the district attorney in Chinatown. They go inside the bathroom to treat his nose. Suddenly, they get all kissy face and make love. Afterwards, in the bed, Jake, under pressure, finishes his story. He said he liked his work until he did something that resulted in a woman being hurt. The phone rings and Evelyn has an odd conversation and says she has to go away for a bit. She asks that he trust her until she returns. Before Evelyn leaves, she tells Jake that the Albacore Club belongs to her father. Jake already knows, and Evelyn gets squirrely when she learns that Jake and her father have met. Jake tells that Noah is looking for Hollis's girlfriend. Evelyn says it's possible that her father may be behind the murders and the land conspiracy. When Evelyn is in the shower, Jake breaks one of her taillights so he can easily follow her using Hollis's car. Evelyn arrives at a moderate bungalow and is let inside by the butler from the mansion. Jake peeks in the window and sees the two talking. In another room, Hollis's former girlfriend is hysterically crying. Evelyn gives her some pills. Jake is waiting in Evelyn's car when she gets outside. He believes that Evelyn is holding her dead husband's former girlfriend as a prisoner. Evelyn says the woman is upset because she just found out about Hollis's death. She then says the woman is her younger sister. Evelyn won't tell why the former girlfriend is crying hysterically. She has allowed her husband to have an affair with her sister to make him happy. Evelyn still wants Jake to come back with her. Back at his place, Jake gets a call from Detective Loach. Loach tells him that Ida Sessions wants to see him. After Jake hangs up, Loach calls him with an address. The sun has risen by the time Jake arrives at the location. When Jake arrives, the door is open and he goes inside. He finds Ida dead on the kitchen floor. Loach and Escobar are hiding in the bathroom. They come out and question Jake about knowing Ida. They show Jake the pictures he took of Hollis and his girlfriend. Escobar figures that Ira hired Jake to set up Hollis, and Evelyn has been paying him to cover up that she murdered her husband. Then Escobar tells Jake that Hollis's lungs were filled with salt water, so he couldn't have drowned at the reservoir. Escobar wants any other pictures that Jake has. Jake tells Escobar about the water being dumped. Jake takes him to the drain pipe, but there is no fresh water. They contact Yelburton, and he uses the story of giving water to the orange growers. Escobar tells Jake to be in his office in 2 hours with Evelyn. Jake goes to Evelyn's mansion, and the maid answers the door. The maid is preparing the house for an extended period of non-occupancy. Jake goes out to the backyard, and the gardener is working with sod. Smart Aleck Jake says, "Bad for glass." The gardener repeats back, and then he says, "Salt water is bad for glass."
Yeah, bad for the glass.
Oh, yes. Bad for glass. Salt water, very bad for glass.
Jake realizes the man is saying grass. The pool is filled with salt water. Jake asks about the object he tried to retrieve earlier. The gardener pulls it out, and it's Hollis's glasses. Jake speeds to the house where Evelyn's sister lives. The butler tries to stop him, but Evelyn comes down and is happy to see Jake. Jake wants to see the sister. Jake calls Escobar and gives him the address as he now thinks Evelyn is guilty of murdering Hollis. Under a slapping examination from Jake, Evelyn admits that Hollis's former girlfriend is her daughter and her sister.
She's my daughter.
I said I want the truth.
She's my sister. She's my daughter. My sister, my daughter.
Evelyn had become pregnant as a result of an incestuous relationship with her father, Noah Cross. At that time, Evelyn fled to Mexico. Hollis was the one that came down and helped her. She says she now wants to spend time with her daughter/sister. Evelyn tells Jake that the glasses are not Hollis's because they are bifocals. Evelyn introduces her daughter, Catherine, Belinda Palmer, to Jake. The butler, Catherine, and Evelyn leave to hide at the butler's house in Chinatown. Jake calls his associates and says to meet at the butler's address. When the two detectives arrive, Jake leads them on a wild goose chase to Evelyn's maid's house. Jake asks to go in alone. The battered wife of Curly answers the door. Jake gets Curly to drive him away. He will give Curly $100 and cover his bill if he will take Evelyn and Catherine out of town on his boat. Jake calls Noah Cross and says he has Catherine/Hollis's former girlfriend, Evelyn's sister/daughter. Cross arrives wanting to see Catherine, and Jake says she is with her mother. Jake gives Cross the obituary, then accuses him of killing Hollis by drowning him in the saltwater pool. Cross says the dam will be built and the valley will be incorporated into the city. Cross tries to justify his actions.
How much are you worth?
I have no idea. How much do you want?
No, I just want to know what you're worth. Over 10 million?
Oh, my, yes.
Why are you doing it? How much better can you eat? What can you buy that you can't already afford?
The future, Mr. Gittes. The future. Now, where's the girl? I want the only daughter I've got left.
Mulvihill comes in with a gun and takes the glasses from Jake. The three men head to Chinatown. When they get out, Walsh and Duffy are there, as are Loach and Escobar. The cops arrest Jake and won't listen to his explanation. Loach takes Jake to handcuff him to the police car wheel. Evelyn, Catherine, the butler, and the maid come outside. Cross begins talking to Catherine. Evelyn sends her helpers, including Curly, away. Cross begs Evelyn to be reasonable. Evelyn pulls a gun on Cross to keep him away from Catherine. Jake yells for her to put the gun down. She fires a shot and hits Cross in the shoulder. Escobar fires a couple of warning shots, then shoots at Evelyn's tires. Jake jumps on his arm, and Loach fires at the car. The horn sounds and the car stops as Evelyn falls dead. Cross is distraught that Evelyn is dead, but he creepily takes Catherine away. Escobar lets Jake go so he won't be involved in the murder. Walter says, "Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown."
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
I'll be back with conclusions and the world-famous short summary following a word from our sponsors. Summary. Wow, what a tale. This movie is fiction, but it's based very loosely on factual events. William Mulholland, superintendent of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, was responsible for the 223-mile Los Angeles Aqueduct. This diverted water from the Owens River in 1913. In 1924, the conflict over water erupted into fighting and sabotage. These events all took place 13 years before the time period of this movie. In the movie, they reference the Vanderlip Dam failure. This failure is likely based on the collapse of the St. Francis Dam in 1928, which happened 9 years before the time period of this movie. This was the last film made in America by Roman Polanski. He was arrested and pled guilty to sexual intercourse with a 13-year-old girl. Just before sentencing, he fled to France and has avoided countries with U.S. extradition treaties. There was a vastly inferior sequel to this film, The Two Jakes, 1990, directed by Jack Nicholson. Rumors have persisted that there was to be a third movie about a company buying the trolleys and other transportation so they could make money replacing them with freeways. This plot is similar to the underlying story featured in the hilariously funny Who Framed Roger Rabbit, 1988. World famous short summary. The man who knows the farm controls the crops, but the man who knows or owns the law controls the river and the land. Hope you enjoyed today's show. You can find connections to social media and email on the site at classicmovierev.com or in the podcast show notes. Don't forget to follow the links in the show notes or from the site to visit our store. We have lots of noir designs. If you enjoyed the show, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. If you're already subscribed, you can tell a friend, a colleague, or a family member about the show, or leave a review where you get your podcast. It really helps the show get found. If you want to comment, suggest a movie, or help out, contact me by email at jec@classicmovierev.com. Beware the Moors.